It is a well-known fact that most people who try to play guitar end up quitting within a few months, and the statistics for those of us with ADHD are even worse. Most of the time, we end up staying perpetual beginners, or we lose interest completely because we can't figure out how to actually learn the material in a way that works for us. So we lose motivation and we never really make any progress. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why traditional methods do not work for us, going beyond all the obvious things that you already know, and share what to do instead. Now, just to be clear, I am not a guitar teacher, but I have been playing guitar for nearly 30 years. And as a person with ADHD who was undiagnosed until well into my adulthood, I know firsthand the many challenges that we can face. In fact, the topic of my entire master's thesis revolved around different ways to manage adult ADHD, and I am now an ADHD coach. So my aim for this video is not to try to teach you how to play guitar, but rather how to work with your brain so that you can overcome these obstacles and finally master the instrument. Now, I'll try to post the most important points on the screen so it's a little bit easier to follow, and I will timestamp everything down below in case you want to jump straight to the tips, but I really recommend watching the breakdown first of everything that's going on for us, because I think you're going to find it to be very validating. And there's also some really specific nuanced things that are happening for us as guitar players that can be life-changing to finally make sense of. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Nina, and this is not the typical type of content that I usually post here, although I do make a lot of ADHD support videos on my mental health channel that I will go ahead and link down below. But I felt this was an important video to make because every single person that I know with ADHD that has tried to play guitar has seemingly had a similar journey because we all have the same challenges. We have difficulty focusing, we get bored easily, we have trouble following through on things, our mind wanders, and we're usually completely disorganized. But there are also three other things that you may not have factored in that I think actually interfere with us learning how to play guitar even more, at least in the traditional way. The first is that one of the core features of ADHD involves a dysregulation of dopamine, a neurotransmitter that is necessary for reward and motivation. Having lower levels of dopamine can affect us learning guitar in a million different ways. But one that I see a lot of people struggle with that no one really talks about is that the anticipation of learning to play the instrument can give us way more dopamine than actually doing it, especially at the beginning. This can unfortunately lead us to quit trying to play once our hyperfixation wears off and just go chase dopamine somewhere else before we actually get good. Now, the next thing is something that I wish all guitar teachers understood, and that's that people with ADHD do not have importance-based nervous systems like neurotypical people do. We have interest-based nervous systems. This means that although it makes perfect sense to us that there would be a logical order to learn things on the guitar as there would be for anything else, we can't get our brains to care about that. In other words, while neurotypical people tend to prioritize what they learn based on perceived importance, individuals with ADHD naturally prioritize things based on their level of interest or enjoyment, and this is not something that we can control. This has huge implications for learning guitar because it means we're not going to be able to follow a strict progression of learning scales and chords and techniques in a systematic order like other people do because our learning style is nonlinear. And when we're not self-directed, we usually lose motivation almost immediately because we are ignoring our natural tendencies and what we naturally find stimulating. And that brings me to the next thing that is vital to keep in mind here, and that is that there are really only 5 things that will motivate someone with ADHD. And you can remember them with the acronym INCUP. They are interest, which we already talked about, but also novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. Other people may not understand this at all, but these really are the only things. And that's why it's so important that we try to incorporate at least one of these factors into every single practice session, or we are never going to have the motivation to continue. To actually learn guitar, we have to accept that our brains do work differently, and that the process is likely not going to be a straight path in the same way as it is for neurotypical people. Now, we can try to force ourselves to learn in the traditional way and fight against all our natural tendencies. But when we do this, we really run the risk of quitting the instrument completely because we make ourselves absolutely miserable and it will all start to feel impossible for us. I do want to say here, though, that if we can learn to work through our challenges, which is definitely possible to do, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, then there is a good chance that we can actually have an advantage over other guitar players because we tend to be incredibly creative and innovative, and we have the superpower of hyperfocus. This is when we get to the point where we're absolutely absorbed in something that we find intensely interesting. We get into this flow state where we lose track of time and we can easily play and practice for hours and enjoy every moment. So really our mission here is to find ways to push through the initial challenges and stay motivated and inspired long enough to practice on a regular basis so that we can get to a place in our playing that we can just immediately get sucked into hyperfocus and get lost in a flow state. Because really, once we have enough skill to make playing guitar a source of dopamine instead of frustration, we will never run the risk of quitting ever again. So the big question is, how do we get there? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to take away the rules. Stop trying to limit yourself to the logical order of doing things just because everyone says that that is what you are supposed to do, and just jump into whatever part of the process actually inspires you. I promise you that eventually you are going to want to learn everything that you skipped over, but you're never going to want to practice if you don't make it fun. Guitar can be really challenging, especially at first, and we tend to have a low frustration tolerance, and we tend to be perfectionists. So to work around all of this, we have to do things our way. And so if that means that you want to learn the solo from Comfortably Numb before you learn how to play a bar chord, then just go ahead and do that. And I know all the reasons why a music teacher would argue this, but I really stand firm here because we have to let ourselves play whatever makes us actually want to pick up the guitar, because in the end, that is all that really matters. Now, my next suggestion is to try to learn at least one full song as soon as it is physically possible for you, even if it's a super easy one. There is just so much satisfaction in this, and it helps us prove to ourselves that learning guitar is actually doable. We've had a lifetime of feeling like we always give up on things and that we never see things through. So seeing ourselves succeed is actually really important. Now, another important thing is to always have at least one specific goal that you are working on and to plan your practice sessions out ahead of time. We tend to be really indecisive and overthinkers, which is exactly how we can just end up wasting a lot of time when we want to practice because we can never figure out what we want to work on. From experience, I can tell you that if we wait until we pick up the guitar to decide what we're going to do, we usually end up just spending the entire time trying to figure that out. We just get distracted trying to look up new songs to learn or trying to follow a YouTube clip that we decide halfway through that we're not really into, so we give up on. And before we know it, hours and hours have gone by and we haven't really accomplished anything. So to avoid all this, we really do need to plan things out in advance. And we're never really going to get anywhere if we don't give ourselves a specific direction to go in. And if we don't give ourselves new challenges or new techniques to learn, then really we're just going to get bored. And that brings me to my next point, which is to write everything down. Trust me, if you do not do this, you will forget that amazing thing you just figured out, or the name of the band that you just heard that had the great riff, or the YouTube clip that you wanted to come back to. Do not try to rely on your brain to store this type of information, because that is one of the things that we struggle with the most. You can screenshot things in the moment or text yourself, but definitely make sure that all of this information gets written down and stored in one place. And I definitely suggest that that place be an official guitar binder. I could not live without mine. That is where I store absolutely everything, and the only way that I can stay organized. I've tried other systems, but there's always too many steps. So that is one of the things that has helped me the most. Okay, let's talk about motivation, or mainly the point that we're not always going to have it. And like we discussed earlier, there really are only those 5 things that can get us motivated. But I have found that there are a few things that can help. One is to set a practice time that you turn into a ritual. This helps us to remember to do it, and it helps with decision fatigue, which is something else that we can struggle with. We don't have to spend any kind of mental energy trying to figure out some kind of schedule. We just know that we always practice at this certain time. For me, it's right before bed, but it could be whatever it is for you. And when we do this, it just becomes a habit, and we're much less likely to procrastinate or blow it off. Now, another thing that we can do when we have no motivation is to steal momentum from something else. People with ADHD simply cannot go from being in a complete state of rest to all of a sudden expecting themselves to spring into action and perform some kind of a task. It is impossible for us unless there is some kind of emergency. We need some kind of transition. So when we're feeling unmotivated to practice, something that we can try is to engage in some kind of other activity that we enjoy as a transition and kind of build up momentum and then transfer that energy into our guitar practice. This is something that works really well for me. All I do is just kind of walk outside for like 10 minutes, and I have found that that completely fixes the issue. Another thing that we can do to encourage ourselves to play is to just always have the guitar visible. We tend to forget about things that we cannot see. So if the guitar is staring us in the face, we are much more likely to pick it up and play. And if you have multiple guitars, don't store them in one place. Kind of spread them around the house so you have more opportunities to see them. And another trick is to just tell yourself that you're going to pick it up and play for like 5 minutes, because usually from experience, you're not going to want to put it down at that time. You're going to want to play for a lot longer, which is fantastic. Now, to increase our concentration and try to trigger hyperfocus, we need to get rid of any distractions and try to block out the rest of the world. We don't want to hear any random noises or notifications or have any interruptions, because if any of these things are distracting us, we're never going to be able to get completely absorbed into what we're doing, which is essentially what hyperfocus is. We also tend to be really affected by aesthetics. So believe it or not, it can help us to practice when we like the look and the feel of the place that we're practicing in. I definitely try to create a certain mood in the room where I'm practicing, and I feel like it really does help to make the time seem more special and appealing. So that's something else to consider. And lastly, I think your actual instrument should inspire you. Of course, we have to work with what we have, but if there is a choice, get something that you really like. I got the custom strap behind me when I could barely play, and it was one of the best investments that I could have ever made because it actually inspired me, and it still inspires me to this day. I don't think you have to achieve any kind of particular skill level to be able to own anything. If you love it and it's in your budget, just go ahead and get it if it makes you happy, because that really is the entire point. So those are all the things that have helped me the most, but I think the biggest thing is just to create a realistic ritual that you are actually going to be able to stick to. It's all about knowing yourself and how your brain works and figuring out how to work with your tendencies and intrinsic motivation. Do not pay any attention to how neurotypical people learn, because it really doesn't matter if it doesn't work for you personally. Just figure out what does work and create a routine around that. And I promise you, you are going to notice a huge difference right away. Like I said earlier, we just need to get to the point where the reward is greater than the struggle. And it really won't take long if we are learning in a way that actually motivates us. So that is it, and I truly hope that you find this information helpful and that it helps make your guitar learning journey a lot easier than mine was. I'd love to hear about yours, however, in the comments, so let me know. And I'd like to also hear if there's anything you'd like to add to this list. I will go ahead and link down my other channel in the comments as well, in case you are looking for further ADHD support, because that's where I usually post it. But if you are a fan of rock and metal, I hope you check out this channel as well. I want to thank you so much for watching and for making it all the way to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.